Now, the Prime Minister has announced £40 million of more funding to fix flood defences in regions affected by extreme weather this Christmas. But a leaked document in the Observer newspaper today says ministers were warned weeks beforehand that spending cuts could leave thousands of extra homes at risk of flooding. Well, I'm joined now by the Financial Secretary to the Treasury, David Gauke, and a very good morning to you. Now, notwithstanding this £40 million, this memo the Observer's got its hands on, I mean, it's indisputable, isn't it, that overall funding for flood defences has been cut?
No, that's not the case. The reality is that if you look at what we're spending on flood defences, it's going to be more over the course of this Parliament than it was in the last Parliament under the coalition government, and the coalition government actually spent more on flood defences than under the last Parliament of the Labour government. So spending has gone up.
It does depend how you add it all up, doesn't it? I mean, if you look at, and this is coming from the Association of Drainage Authorities, which is everyone involved in it, saying the Environment Agency's funding for maintaining flood assets has fallen by 14%. The National Audit Office total funding has declined 10%. They're not making that up.
Well, as I say, I think that report was written, or that submission was written in the run-up to the autumn spending review, when we set out our £2.3 billion that we're spending over 6 years on flood defences. So, obviously it was making the case for more money on flood defences, and indeed the autumn spending review set out more money for flood defences. As I say, we're spending an unprecedented amount on our flood defences. Today we've got the announcement from the Prime Minister of an additional £40 million in respect of repairing flood defences that have been affected by the recent storms. But the reality is that we are spending more. Now, the reason we can do that is because the economy is stronger and we've got the resources to do it. But even in the last Parliament, where we faced significant difficulties with the public finances, capital spending on flood defences increased in real terms.
I'd say it depends where you start from. But, we have the Prime Minister's statement a couple of years ago while he was standing in his wellies on the Somerset levels talking about whatever it takes. The fact is you're a Treasury man. It's not whatever it takes. There is a limited pot ultimately, isn't there, for flood defence spending?
But if you look at what we're doing at the moment in response to the storms that we've seen, and an extraordinary December in terms of rainfall, but we have seen the Bellwin formula come into place, which means that we're funding local authorities for the expenditure that they're putting in, that we're providing support to households that have been affected. We're trying to make sure that that money goes out the door and get support to people as quickly as possible. We've got the announcement today in terms of flood defences. So of course, it's always a question of priorities, but providing support to those who have been affected by floods and ensuring that we have got strong flood defences is really important. Okay. And what we're going to see is 1,500 flood schemes over the next 6 years, helping 300,000 households being funded because we can afford to do so.
Right, and that's what I want to get onto now, because we can afford to do so. But of course, you must be worried about the direction of the borrowing figures. I mean, the last figures we have, perhaps you've had an early look at December's, the last figures we have from November showed you'd borrowed, £66.9 billion in the first 8 months of the financial year. Now, doing my maths, and I want you to help me out with this with Nikki Morgan in mind in her Times tables, that's just around about £8 billion a month for 8 months. So times 12 months, how much would you borrow?
It's a rule, as you know, for all ministers not to do anything on screen, because the one moment you get it wrong, it's never ever forgotten.
Well, let me tell you, if you keep borrowing at that level, you'll borrow £96 billion, which I know you won't over the course of the financial year. But can you hit your target? It's 68.9 billion.
The other rule, as a Treasury Minister, I must admit I've learned, is not to pay too much attention to monthly numbers, because the nature of the public finances is that very often an item of expenditure falls in one month and not another month, and so on. It is better to wait to look at what the Independent Office of Budget Responsibility says, either at an autumn statement or at a budget. At the autumn statement that was delivered not that long ago, the OBR predicted that we would be running a surplus by the end of this Parliament, and that we were on course for a significant reduction in borrowing.
But no predictions about the target for
what I would say is not to pay too much attention on the monthly numbers, because these things do vary. There's an important month to come with January, where we get a lot of tax receipts in, and we'll see where we are at the the budget.
Maybe we'll talk then. Let me ask you, though, I mean, I read the Prime Minister's New Year's message with interest, and he seems fairly optimistic, as you are, about the economy. Just, give us a reality check here. There are some icebergs out there, aren't there? We've seen the Federal Reserve raise interest rates. We don't know which way the Bank of England is going to go or when it's going to go. We know they're going to go up. That could be a bit of a shock to the system, and bigger existential threats in terms of what's happening with China and the Eurozone.
Well, the first point to make is that there are also some very encouraging things about the economy.
Well, we got all those from the Prime Minister. Just give us that reality check.
Indeed, but we shouldn't forget that we've got employment at record levels, for example. That is an important fact. But you are right to say that there are always risks that are out there, which is why, for example, you have to use the relatively good years in the economy to make progress in improving the public finances. You mentioned the US Fed putting up interest rates. They've done that because they think that the US economy is strong. And it'd be fair to say that the US economy is forecast to be the fastest growing economy in the G7 in 2015, alongside the UK. So we do face, that in itself is probably not discouraging. But of course there are international risks, there often are, and we need to ensure that we build as strong economy as possible. That means sorting out the public finances. It means having an enterprising, dynamic economy that's good for business, and that's exactly what we're delivering, and that's why it is worth pointing out the progress we've made in terms of employment, in terms of reducing the deficit. But of course there's more to do.
Just want to ask you a quick question. We're talking about business and trading partners and things like that. About Saudi Arabia, were you shocked by those executions? 47 executions in one go, including a senior Shia cleric.
Well, look, clearly it is a very worrying development, and we oppose capital punishment in this way. We think that is wrong. I'd also make the point in terms of Saudi Arabia is that when it comes to protecting British people, the Prime Minister has made it clear that intelligence from Saudi Arabia has helped save lives and protect people in the UK. We do have a relationship where we
look at our business and trading links.
Well, we have a relationship with Saudi Arabia where we are able to speak candidly to them, where these issues are raised on a regular basis by the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister and our representatives in Riyadh. We are able to have that relationship where we can tell them what we think, and I have to say, it clearly is a worrying development, what we've heard from Saudi Arabia in the last few days.
Financial Secretary, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed for your time. David Gauke there.